Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1117, 1117, Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course it is Wednesday and that is the day that I gather up the trash and have some chicken. Oh boy, I'm thinking chicken and dumplings. Maybe some chicken and dumplings. I mean, it's a special day and I like chicken and dumplings. One of my favorites. And I should be having one of my favorites on a day like today because today is a special TowerGate. One for the archives, because we had some information that came out yesterday completely, purposely missed by the media, but completely overlooked by even many of those who claim to be following this story, such as Sean Hannity, Lou Dobbs, Tucker Carlson. I watched every one of the Fox News guys last night, and not a single one of them touched on this story. All of them dedicate their entire show to coronavirus. That's all they got. Completely missed this story. Huge story. It's not that the story itself had such a big headline that, that you would say, wow, this is a major game changer. It's what's in the details of the story. If you understand the story, really understand the story, why this revelation is so important in this particular story. And the story, of course, is by Chuck Ross in the Daily Caller. And the headline of the story is Christopher Steele had previously undisclosed meetings with lawyers for the DNC and Hillary Clinton. Now, as many of you know, been watching my channel for a while, you know that for about 2 years now, I determined about 2 years ago, let's put it this way, I determined about 2 years ago that the rotten Reverend Clinton, the demonic buzzard, was the one who was the mastermind of the Russiagate conspiracy. The Trump collusion conspiracy. Hillary Clinton was the mastermind, along with her inside cronies, which would include this little inside group that put this whole thing together. Would be the Rotten Reverend, Podesta, Jake Sullivan, Cody Shearer, Sidney Blumenthal, her two lawyers over there at Perkins Coie, Mark Elias and Michael Sussman, along with Glenn Simpson and his little inside crew that he was running. So this is really the inside players. They're really the ones who cooked up the Russiagate scheme. The Rotten Reverend planned, directed, organized, and controlled this entire plot. This was supposed to be the thing that would defeat Trump because she knew she couldn't win fairly. And this was going to be the October surprise. But it didn't work out the way that she thought. Remember, when Christopher Steele did his deposition in the BuzzFeed case, he said that he was hired to procure information, evidence that could be used by Hillary Clinton in a legal proceeding if she lost the election. He was hired to get incriminating evidence on Trump that she could use against him to go to court if she lost the election. That's what Christopher Steele said he was hired to do. That's what he told BuzzFeed lawyers in the deposition. Now, that's what he told, what's-his-name's lawyers, the Russian guy. Now, I'm going to go through the details of this story, and then I'm going to tie it together for you of why this is so critical to understand. Because, as I've said before, when John Durham finally gets to the bottom of this stinking kettle of fish, he is going to find the Rotten Reverend Clinton was the mastermind of this plot. And here is the first major break in the dam. Now, as many of you, if you've been following me for a while, you know that several months back I actually took a piece of paper. I drew a circle, a small circle on a center of a piece of paper, and I drew a big circle on the outside edge of the paper, almost like wheels, like the inside circle being a hub and the outside circle being a wheel. And I wrote Hillary on the inside hub, and then I wrote the names of all the players, the major players in the Russiagate fiasco. And then I drew a line from each one of those that had a connection to Hillary Clinton. And what I found is that about 95%, almost all, of the characters who are main players have an absolute proven direct connection to the Rotten Reverend Clinton. And there was a few that I could not guarantee had a direct connection to her or who knew her personally. But 95% of them are all connected to or either working for, being paid by, or friends of the rotten Reverend Clinton. So with that in mind, let me now go through the story, point out the salient details to you, and then I'll give you an explanation at the end. I'll try not to get sidetracked as I go along, but it's very difficult. Okay, and this is basically Chuck Ross has received or has obtained the deposition from Christopher Steele in the lawsuit he's currently being involved in, where he's being sued by the 3 owners of Alpha Bank. So, Christopher Steele, says it was Michael Sussman, who provided him with the now debunked tip that the Russian Alpha Bank, had a secret communications channel with the Trump Organization. This is the most important claim made in this statement, and the one we're really going to drill down on. Christopher Steele says it was Michael Sussman. That was Hillary Clinton's lawyer for her during the 2016 campaign from the Perkins Coie law firm. Michael Sussman was her personally, the lawyer personally assigned to Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. Steele says it was Michael Sussman who provided him with the now debunked tip that a Russian bank had a secret communications channel with the Trump Organization. Remember that. That's the major point. Now, we also learn from this story that Sussman also provided, and we've covered this many times as well, Sussman also provided General Counsel James Baker of the FBI with a thumb drive and some documents regarding the exact same false allegation about Trump having direct contact with Alpha Bank. Of course, we covered this a long time ago. We've known this for over a year and a half. We knew that it was Sussman who went in and gave this information about Trump server communicating with Alpha Bank server. We know it was Sussman who went into General Counsel Baker and hand-delivered this to him. Remember, he's Comey's lawyer. He's Comey's FBI lawyer. And it was Sussman, Hillary's lawyer, who went in and gave this information to Baker. But we didn't know that Sussman also gave it to Christopher Steele and others. We're going to find out who those people were. Steele held back on this information by not providing it to the FBI until September 14th of 2016. In one of his memos that are part of the phony dossier. So Steele sits on this information. He gets it from Sussman, and he sits on it for about 6 weeks. Now, 1 week after providing the FBI with this information, he met with Christopher Steele. 1 week after providing the FBI, this will be September 14th, Steele goes to the FBI on September 14th and gives them this information about Trump and the Alpha Bank server. That's September 14th of 2016. 1 week after providing that information to the FBI, Christopher Steele then goes and meets with Perkins Coie lawyers Michael Sussman and Mark Elias. Steele says in his deposition that he was first told about the Trump Alpha Bank connection during a meeting with Michael Sussman on July the 29th. So we also have learned that Steele and Glenn Simpson would give regular updates to Michael Sussman and sometimes Mark Elias as well throughout this entire time period. And of course, those briefings information would then be passed on to Clinton's campaign team, which would be, of course, her campaign chair, Podesta, her campaign manager, Robbie Mook, and the Rotten Reverend herself. Then it was Glenn Simpson of Confusion GPS who instructed Christopher Steele to write Memo 112. That's the memo about Trump and Alpha Bank. To write Memo 112 and give it to the FBI. So Steele has this meeting on July the 29th with Sussman. He gets this information. Sussman suggests that he take this information and include it in his dossier material. Steele sits on it for a few weeks. Then he talks to Glenn Simpson, and Glenn Simpson directs him to, of course, put this in a memo, and he suggests to Steele that you might have your sources check it out. But so, and allegedly, Steele has somebody, some subsource, who he says checks it out and gets the names of these guys who own Alpha Bank to see what kind of a relationship they have with Putin and this type of thing. And he gets a bunch of rubbish, a bunch of bullshit. He includes it in Memo 112, and then he gives it to the FBI. So Sussman gives Steele this fake information on July 29, 2016. Steele sits on it for a couple weeks until Glenn Simpson contacts him and then says, hey, that information, you need to give it to the FBI. You might want to, check the background on it, but go ahead and put that in one of your memos and make sure the FBI gets it. Glenn Simpson directed it. So the FBI then investigated this particular claim, and they debunked it as being false. It turned out to be a scam. It wasn't true. So the question is, where did Sussman get that fake information? Well, Sussman, as far as we know, has not commented where he gave that information, but Steele did, and we'll get to that here in a little while. Now, Sussman also shopped, besides Sussman just going into General Counsel Baker and giving him this information on a thumb drive with some documents, he also, Sussman, Hillary's lawyer, shopped this phony story to others, including journalists and, of course, as we mentioned, General Counsel James Baker. Now, one of the fake news outlets that Sussman shared this phony story to was the New York Times, and they wrote a story about it on October the 31st, 2016. October 31st, 2016. I remember it quite well. Yes, I do. It was a big deal when that story was written. Then, the very next day, Slate follows up on the New York Times story with a story of their own, alleging the same false claims. And you know what happened right after that? We're going to get to that in just a few moments. Now, this was all coming after Yahoo News had published a story on September the 23rd, 2016, a few weeks earlier, alleging that Carter Page met secretly with Kremlin insiders to discuss exchanging material on the rotten Reverend Clinton, which was also fake news. On that exact same day, the Slate story appeared. David Korn of Mother Jones published a report citing a former Western intelligence officer who claimed the Russian government had compromising material on Trump. And Steele was involved in all three of these stories. Of course, John Durham, as we just learned a week ago, that John Durham is looking into all of those stories right now, and of course that's why he wants to talk to Christopher Steele. Now, it was 5 days after Steele gave the FBI the fake info on Trump about the Alpha Bank connection, September 14th, 2016, that Sussman gave the same information to General Counsel Baker on September 19th, 2016. So September 14th, it's Christopher Steele providing this information to the FBI, and 5 days later, Sussman provides the exact same information to General Counsel James Baker, Comey's lawyer, 5 days apart. And also on September the 19th, the same day that Steele provided, on that same day that General Counsel Baker is given this information from Michael Sussman, on the exact same day, September 19th, Sussman walks in, gives General Counsel Baker this thumb drive and some documents about this Trump-Russia Alpha Bank server thing. The exact same day, September 19th, is when Steele delivers 6 of the 17 memos from the so-called Steele dossier to the FBI. Exact same day. But what's funny about that is Steele did not include Memo 112 as a part of those 6, which is the one that deals. So you have Steele on this day, delivering on September 19, 2016, delivering 6 memos of the 17 that make up the Steele dossier. But the one memo he didn't deliver that day was 112, and that's the one that deals with the Russia Alpha Bank server. But on that exact same day that Steele delivers the 6 memos, that and none of them is 112, Sussman delivers to General Counsel Baker on a thumb drive with some documents essentially the 112 memo. Essentially, it's the stuff talking about Trump and Alpha Bank. I'm sure that was just a coincidence. Now, the FBI did eventually get this so-called Memo 112, or the thumb drive and the stuff. They eventually did get that from Baker, but they didn't receive it until November the 6th of 2016. And I think when they're talking about the FBI, they're talking about the Crossfire Hurricane team, because Baker was the general counsel for Comey, so clearly the FBI got it the day that September 29th, or September 19th, when Sussman delivered it, but it took a while, obviously, before it made its way into the hands of the Crossfire Hurricane team, November 6th, which is when? 2 days before the election. So again, you have to wonder, was that coordinated, or was that simply a coincidence? Now, 3 days later, on September 23rd, we're going back to the 19th now. So 3 days after Steele delivers the 6 memos and Sussman hand walks in the thumb drive and the documents to General Counsel Baker, on that day, 3 days later, on September 23rd, 2016, Christopher Steele meets with Sussman and Elias at their D.C. office. After the meeting, Steele leaves the Perkins Coie D.C. office and he meets with several journalists to discuss the Yahoo News, to discuss the dossier. And of the journalists he met with that day would be Michael Isikoff, of course, the author of the Yahoo News article. He wrote the article the Carter Page story that was used to get the FISA warrant on Page. Now, Steele had previously testified in another deposition that Michael Sussman got the Alpha Bank information from a group of cyber experts in late July of 2016. Sussman got the information, supposedly about Trump Tower and Alpha Bank servers communicating, in late July of 2016. So he obviously sat on it for over a month before he even gave it to Baker or told Steele about it. He briefed Steele on it and he gave it to Baker, Sussman, Hillary's lawyer. And who do you think these cyber experts were? Who do you think the cyber experts were who told Sussman that the Trump Tower server was communicating with Alpha Bank? Let me take a wild guess. Cyber experts. I'm pretty sure it was CrowdStrike. Alpha Bank hired their own cyber security expert to investigate the claim. That's why they got a lawsuit against Christopher Steele right now, because of what their investigation from their cyber experts found. Alpha Bank, the owners of Alpha Bank, hired a cyber security firm of their own. And these cyber experts investigated the situation, and they told the owners of Alpha Bank, they said that the information that was on the server, the Trump server, was most likely fabricated evidence. Fabricated evidence by threat actors that wanted to make it appear as though a connection existed between the Trump organization and Alpha Bank. Now, if this is true, of course, there's multiple criminal violations involved in that. Now, what cybersecurity firm can you think of that we have suspected, even prior to this, may have planted information on a server to make it look like someone else got onto that server? Because that's what the cyber experts for the Russians oligarchs who own Alpha Bank, that's what their cyber experts are telling them that their investigation reveals. So it appears that not only might it have likely been CrowdStrike who planted the fingerprints of so-called Russians on the DNC server to make it look like it was Fancy Bear and Fuzzy Bear or whatever on the DNC server. It looks like they tried to do the exact same damn thing to the server at Trump Tower for the Trump organization. Planting the fingerprints of someone else. That is espionage. That is industrial espionage. It's also violating several other federal laws. I'm sure that John Durham is probably interested in that as well. Now, the same day, this is something else we need to keep in mind. And I'm sure many of you will remember this, going back to 2016. And October 31st, it was a big day, if you remember. It was a big news day. It was a week before the election when this big story hit, and then the following. So on October the 31st, Halloween 2016, I remember it well, the same day that Slate published their fake news story on the Trump Alpha Bank thing, October 31st, 2016, the rotten Reverend Clinton posted a link to that Slate story. And along with that, she included her own personal caption, her own writing to that, where she said that computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to a Russian bank. And then she leaves a link to the story, and also she puts in there a copy and paste job. I'm sure she didn't do it. I'm sure some tech heads did it for her. Copied and pasted in a note in there from Jake Sullivan, sort of a statement, which was a statement that took a lot of the pieces of that story, that Slate story, and sort of copied and pasted it, some of the more juicy details from the body of the story into that tweet. And of course, this was a lengthy statement from Jake Sullivan that used the main body of the Slate story. Now, what's interesting about that is that the rotten Reverend Clinton tweeted this out with this link and with this statement from Jake Sullivan. Literally, I forget, back then we knew it was like 1 minute or 2 minutes after the Slate story posted. So the Slate story post, and within 1 or 2 minutes, the rotten Reverend Clinton has already got the comment. She's got the comment that she makes, leaving the link to the Slate story and also the little copy and paste job of the Jake Sullivan statement. All right there within 1 to 2 minutes of when that Slate story went live. But it gets even worse. If you remember, John Podesta also had tweeted out a link to that story. But the thing about Podesta is he actually tweeted that link out 1 hour before the story even went live. Podesta tweeted it out, the link to it, an hour before it even went live. At least the rotten Reverend Clinton waited 2 minutes. Podesta sent out his link. He had the link for it before it even posted live. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that this was all a complete coordinated effort. It was a plot. They all knew. It was a created, crafted, coordinated plot. So what does all of this mean? Why is this all important? Well, it's a game changer for John Durham. It's a game changer for John Durham. Because it shows that the rotten Reverend Clinton and her team of insiders, Podesta, Mook, Sullivan, Shearer, Blumenthal, they hired a spy to dig up dirt on Trump that would allege his dealings with Russia. And then the rotten Reverend Clinton and her goons used her lawyer, Mr. Sussman, to feed the phony claims to the spy that she hired. And to have her lawyer hand-deliver the same phony lie to the FBI General Counsel James Baker. So this shows a rotten Reverend Clinton's direct involvement in the conspiracy. her direct involvement in the conspiracy. She hires a spy. Now, this is allegedly. This is the cover story. She hires a spy, Christopher Steele, to dig up dirt on Trump. But she has her lawyer, Mr. Sussman, feeding her spy. You see what I mean? This is just the beginning. This is where the light bulb, boom, comes on for John Durham. He's going to be about where I was 2 years ago when he goes, wait a minute. Hillary hires a spy to dig up dirt on Trump, but she's got her lawyer feeding her spy. Well, guess what? That is the entire plot. That's what this entire plot was. This information was being pipelined by the Rotten Reverend Clinton because she also used Cody Shearer, who was busy during the summer of 2016 visiting the State Department, often throughout the summer of 2016, passing around his Shearer dossier, which was damn near identical to the so-called Steele dossier. He was passing along to State Department officials. She also had Shearer give his dossier to Jonathan Weiner, who then passed it on to Christopher Steele, who then passed it on to the FBI. The Rotten Reverend Clinton used Glenn Simpson to spread the dossier, and even before that, it was the proto-dossier. But the media establishment weren't buying the proto-dossier, and they couldn't do anything with it. They were afraid to run any of it because they were afraid they would get sued. And that is why they had to bring in Christopher Steele, because the proto-dossier, the earlier version of the Steele dossier, Simpson's passing it all over town, feeding it to anyone who would take it. And everyone was taking it, and they were reading it, and they were looking at it, but they really couldn't run with it because it was totally uncorroborated. They couldn't verify any of it, and they were afraid of being sued by the Trump campaign. This was frustrating the Rotten Reverend Clinton because this was what she hired Confusion GPS to do, to run a smear campaign. But the media couldn't run with it because Fusion GPS didn't want to get sued, and nor did any of these media people. And they said, man, until you can give us some proof, until you can give us something, we can't run it. So the Rotten Reverend Clinton's pulling her hair out, Podesta, the whole group, they're freaking out because they got this great smear campaign, this October surprise to take out Trump, and it needs to be done through the media, but the media can't run the stories because they can't prove it, and they don't want to get sued. So what do? They bring in Christopher Steele. And Christopher Steele is now going to be the launderer. He's going to be the guy, he's going to be the face, the guy who can sell it. The guy who can go, because he's a former intelligence officer, he's got all these connections, he's got all these sources, Russian sources and stuff. They're going to use this guy to be the face, to be the salesman, and to be the launderer, so that they can get this information pumped into the media. But they take it one step farther. They begin moving it into the State Department so that they can get it into the FBI, where it can be then it becomes a media story, because now you have the FBI investigating these claims, and therefore it becomes a legitimate news story. So now they can start covering the story, Trump, Russia, and all this other stuff, because now the FBI is investigating it, because the Rotten Reverend Clinton sent her cronies into the State Department to leak it on into the FBI through the back door, because all the other methods weren't working. So all the while, the FBI is feeding Christopher Steele. The FBI is feeding Christopher Steele about their investigation. They're naming names of the people that they were investigating to steal, including Page, Manafort, Flynn, and Papadopoulos. And of course, this information given to Steele was passed on to Glenn Simpson, who passed it on to the media. And then out came even more media reports. And that's what John Durham is going to find. Now that he's gotten a window into where this whole pipeline began and where this all began and what the origins of it were, it was a smear campaign by the Rotten Reverend Clinton that wasn't working out because they couldn't verify any of the garbage they were trying to push. So they were forced to bring in Steele and use him as the front man. And when it looked like that didn't work, then they had to go the next route, take it up another level. They had to have an investigation, because then, if there's an investigation, there's a reason for the media to be able to write the stories. So that's why they needed to get an investigation. But then things got really off the rails and got out of hand because the FBI, also you had the CIA pumping this stuff in, and we clearly don't know at this point who it was that was feeding Halper, Downer, and Mifsud. But we know that the Rotten Reverend Clinton has connections to all of them. The Rotten Reverend Clinton has connections to everyone. She is the nucleus of all of this. Everything flows out of her. Everyone in this scam was either A, working for the Rotten Reverend on her payroll, or B, stood to benefit from her winning the election. Everyone was in the tank for the demonic buzzard. She was running the show. Planned, organized, directed, and controlled the entire scam. This was a political October surprise scam job that went very, very badly for the deep state. Papadopoulos has tweeted out in the last 24 hours that Durham has Mifsud's cell phones. Now, we know he obtained SIM cards from a couple of cell phones, maybe a couple of cell phones, but I don't know if he means he's now got all of Mifsud's cell phones or exactly what that's referring to, but that's pretty interesting, because if you can get his phones, you can probably get him. The phones have tracking devices on them. You know, a global positioning satellite will tell you exactly where Misfit is. If he's got a phone, they can find him. We also find out yesterday that Durham has both a mix of Republicans and Democrats on his investigative team, both in Connecticut, New York, and Washington. Why is this? Well, he and Barr are pretty damn smart, and they know that this is going to be turned into a political football. And they want to be able to show that the Durham team was bipartisan, that there were Democrats and Republicans on the Durham team. That's exactly why they're doing it. We had a very interesting situation yesterday with Michael Flynn. An update on that, of course, yesterday in court. This Covington law firm showed up at the court hearing, and they dropped on Judge Sullivan the fact that they had just located 17,500 pages of evidence that had been previously withheld from the judge. The judge had ordered them previously to turn over all their documents. But they did not. Instead, they showed up today and said, hey, guess what? We just found 17,500 more. So this pissed Judge Sullivan off. He was not amused, and he ordered them to review all their case files and turn them over by May the 4th. That's not long. That's next week. And of course, on May 11th, Sullivan is going to be making a decision on whether or not to dismiss the case or not. But I'd say it's looking good for Michael Flynn, looking very bad for Covington Law Firm, because apparently there's another 85,000 pages that Sidney Powell knows about that they're holding, that they're going to have to come off of. And of course, everyone saw the endorsement by the Rotten Reverend Clinton of Biden. It was really funny. She came out, she endorsed Biden, and as soon as she did it, Tara Reid responded on Twitter, and you can imagine how that went. At the very beginning of the interview, it comes on, you have 30 seconds where the Rotten Reverend and Biden are just staring into the camera and nothing's happening. Finally, after about 30 seconds, they get the cue, it's time to go. The Rotten Reverend, first Biden starts off by praising the Rotten Reverend for how great she is, endorsing him, when in fact, it took her all this time to endorse him. Why didn't she endorse him a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago? Nope, not until the last minute. Boy, her timing is very, very bad. She has no political acumen whatsoever. Then, as she's talking, Biden falls asleep. Now, why did the Rotten Reverend Clinton do it just like that? Well, let me tell you. It was done split screen because the Rotten Reverend Clinton realizes at some point she had to come out and endorse Biden. She's going to stab him in the back in a few weeks or months from now, or at the convention. But this actually works in her favor. But what did she really want to do? It was done split screen. If you look at it, you'll see that she has got a brand new hairstyle. She's got her makeup perfect. She's wearing this nice dress. She's got this beautiful scenery behind her. It's all completely professional. She makes Biden look like an amateur. She wanted to do that split screen to show contrast between how the fact that she can actually go on a 15-minute tirade and string sentences together intelligibly, whereas Biden cannot. She wanted the contrast between her and Biden. That's why she did what she did, and she's going to stab him in the back the first chance she gets. Out of time. Back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.